The air on Kepler Station smelled like rust and despair. Captain Jake Morrison walked through the crowded marketplace, his boots clicking against the metal floor. Alien voices filled the air, speaking in languages he didn't understand. The station was huge, built inside an old asteroid. Neon lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows on the walls. Jake had come here to buy supplies for his cargo ship, the Starfall. He needed fuel, food, and spare parts. Nothing special. It's just another routine stop on his trading route through the Outer Rim worlds. But something felt wrong about this place. The legal shops were up front, where everyone could see them. Jake noticed people disappearing down dark hallways, whispering to each other. His sister Lisa had warned him about Kepler Station. She said bad things happened here. Things the Galactic Council pretended not to see. Jake thought she was being too careful, but now he wasn't so sure. A Corvan trader bumped into him, muttering an apology. The bug-like alien scurried away quickly. Jake watched him go, noticing how nervous the creature seemed. Everyone here looked nervous, like they were afraid of something. Jake followed the main corridor deeper into the station. The legitimate shops gave way to darker areas. The lights were dimmer here. The air was thicker, and the smell got worse. It wasn't just rust anymore, it was fear. That's when he heard the voices. Rough, cruel voices speaking in Galactic Standard. Jake stopped walking and listened. The voices were coming from a side passage marked with symbols. He couldn't read. But he didn't need to read them to know this was somewhere he shouldn't go. Jake had always been too curious for his own good. Lisa told him that all the time. So instead of walking away, he moved closer to the passage. He stayed in the shadows and looked around the corner. What he saw made his stomach turn. It was a market, but not for goods. It was for people. Dozens of different alien species stood in metal cages or chained to posts. Some were clearly intelligent beings. They had clothes, even if they were dirty and torn. They had expressions of sadness and fear that Jake recognized as very human-like emotions. A fat hegemony official walked between the cages, pointing at different prisoners. He was talking. 2 potential buyers about prices and qualities. Like these people were livestock. Jake wanted to leave. This wasn't his problem. He was just a trader trying to make a living. He had his own crew to worry about, but his feet wouldn't move. He kept staring at the scene in front of him. That's when he saw her. She was in a cage near the back. Her skin was silver, almost metallic looking, and she had long white hair that hung over her face. She was clearly not human, but she looked human enough that Jake felt a connection. She was small and thin, too thin. Her clothes were nothing more than rags. A metal collar was locked around her neck. Jake had heard about those collars. They were used to control psychic species, to cut them off from their natural abilities. The silver-skinned woman sat with her knees pulled up to her chest, but she didn't look at anyone. She just stared at the floor of her cage like she had given up hope completely. A hegemony merchant approached her cage. He was talking to a well-dressed alien Jake didn't recognize. The merchant kicked the cage bars. "This is a Vellani female," the merchant said in Galactic Standard. 3 years of training, very obedient, good with household tasks. The psychic dampener keeps her from reading thoughts or sending mental messages. The potential buyer looked interested.
What about her
condition? She looks damaged, the merchant laughed. It was a cruel sound. Nothing that can't be fixed with proper discipline. The previous owner was too soft, but she learns quickly when properly motivated. Jake watched the Vellani woman flinch at the merchant's words. She still didn't look up, but he could see her shoulders shake slightly. The buyer shook his head. "I need something more presentable. What else do you have?" The merchant moved on to other cages, but Jake kept watching the Vellani woman. Something about her reminded him of his sister when she was younger. Lisa had that same look when their parents died. Like the world had broken her spirit. Jake told himself to walk away, to go back to his ship and forget what he had seen. This kind of thing happened all over the galaxy. The hegemony controlled dozens of worlds. They treated conquered species however they wanted. The Galactic Council looked the other way because the hegemony was too powerful to fight. But Jake couldn't forget his parents. They had raised him and Lisa to believe that all thinking beings deserved to be free. They had died fighting pirates who were trying to enslave a colony ship. It was probably an accident, but the merchant came running. Over anyway. His face was red with anger. "Clumsy slave," he shouted. He grabbed a shock stick from his belt and reached through the cage bars. The woman tried to move away. There was nowhere to go in the small cage. The merchant hit her with the stick. Electricity coursed through her body, and she cried out in pain. She fell to the floor of the cage, shaking. "That's for making a mess," the merchant said. "Do it again, and you'll get worse." Other buyers and merchants barely looked up. This was normal to them. It's just part of doing business. But it wasn't normal to Jake Morrison. He stepped out of the shadows and walked straight to the merchant. The fat alien looked up at him with surprise. "How much for the Villani?" Jake asked. The merchant looked Jake up and down. He saw the simple clothes and practical gear of a cargo ship captain. Not a wealthy buyer, but someone with enough money to be worth talking to. "She's not in the best condition," the merchant said, suddenly trying to be a salesman, "but still functional. Previous owner didn't take proper care of her. I can let her go for 8,000 credits. Jake looked at the woman in the cage. She had raised her head slightly and was staring at him. Her eyes were large and completely black. There was intelligence there, and pain, and something else. Maybe hope, though Jake wasn't sure. 8,000 credits was more than Jake had planned to spend on this entire supply run. It would eat into his profit margin badly. Lisa would not be happy. But he thought about his parents again, about the values they had taught him. 6,000, Jake said, and you throw in her personal effects. The merchant laughed. She doesn't have any personal effects. Slaves don't own things. 7,000, final offer. Late Jake looked at the Villani. Woman again. She was still watching him. He could see her trying to figure out if he was just another buyer or something different. Jake was walking back through the station with his new purchase following behind him. The merchant had removed her cage lock, but left the collar around her neck. He said Jake could figure out how to control it himself. The Villani woman walked slowly, keeping her eyes on the ground. She didn't try to run or fight. Jake figured she had learned that resistance only brought more pain. Her name was Zara, according to the merchant's records. She was 24 standard years old and had been enslaved for 3 years. Before that, she had lived on Velen Prime. Until the hegemony conquered her world, Jake didn't know what he was going to do with her. He had never owned another person, and the idea made him sick. But he couldn't just leave her in that cage. As they walked toward the docking bay where the Starfall was waiting, Jake made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He was going to set her free. The Starfall was not a big ship, but it was home to Jake Morrison and his small crew. As they walked up the loading ramp, Zara stayed 3 steps behind him. She kept her head down and her hands clasped in front of her. This was how slaves were. Supposed to walk? Jake realized. It's always showing respect and submission. It made him angry. The cargo bay was full of supplies Jake had bought earlier. Boxes of food, machine parts, and fuel cells were stacked against the walls. The smell of engine oil and recycled air filled the space. To Jake, it smelled like freedom and adventure. To Zara, it probably smelled like another prison. Jake, is that you? A voice called from deeper in the ship. Lisa Morrison appeared at the top of the cargo bay stairs. She was younger than Jake by 2 years, with short brown hair and grease stains on her flight suit. She had been working in the engine room, as usual. Lisa stopped when she saw Zara. Her eyes went wide with shock and confusion.
Jake, what did
you do? She asked. I bought her, Jake said simply. You bought a person? Lisa's voice was getting louder. You completely insane? Pete Collins emerged from behind a stack of cargo containers. He was the ship's engineer and mechanic. Pete was a big man with kind eyes and rough hands. He looked at Zara and then at Jake. Boss, please tell me you have a good reason for this, Pete said. Jake looked at his crew. These people trusted him with their lives every day. They deserved an explanation. But first, he had something more important to do. He turned to Zara. She was standing perfectly still, waiting for orders. Her black eyes watched him carefully, trying to figure out what kind of master he would be. Jake reached toward her neck. Zara flinched and stepped back automatically. She expected to be hit. The movement was so quick and fearful that it broke Jake's heart. "I'm not going to hurt you," Jake said softly. "I want to remove your collar." Zara stared at him. She didn't understand. Masters didn't remove slave collars. The collar was what made her a slave. "It's okay," Jake said. He moved slowly, like he was approaching a frightened animal. "I promise I won't hurt you." Zara stood very still as Jake examined the collar around her neck. It was made of dark metal with small lights that blinked red every few seconds. Was a lock mechanism on the back. "Pete, do you have your tools?" Jake asked. Pete nodded and went to get his toolkit. Lisa came down the stairs to get a closer look. "Jake, what are you doing?" she asked. "The right thing," Jake replied. Pete returned with a small electronic device, studied the collar for a moment, then attached his tool to the lock. There was a soft beeping sound, then a click. The collar opened and fell to the floor with a metallic clang. Zara gasped and raised her hands to her neck. For the first time in 3 years, there was nothing there. No weight, no constant reminder that she was property. She could feel her. Telepathic abilities starting to return, like a warm feeling spreading through her mind. "There," Jake said. "You're free." Zara looked at him like he had spoken in an alien language she didn't understand. "Free?" she whispered. It was the first word she had spoken since Jake bought her. "Yes, free," Jake said. "You don't belong to me. You don't belong to anyone. You can leave if you want to." Zara began to shake. This was impossible. Humans were known throughout the galaxy as traders and explorers, but they weren't known for freeing slaves. Most species ignored slavery or participated in it. "Why would this human be different?" "I don't understand," Zara said. Her voice was quiet and rough from not speaking much. Lisa stepped forward. Despite her shock, she could see that Zara was scared and confused. "What's your name?" Lisa asked gently. "Zara," she replied. "I'm Lisa. This is my brother Jake, and that's Pete. We're not slavers, Zara. We're cargo runners. We transport goods between worlds." Zara looked around at the 3 humans. They were all watching her with expression she hadn't seen in years. Not anger or cruelty or indifference. Something else. Thing that might have been kindness. "What do you want from me?" Zara asked. It was a fair question. In her experience, everyone wanted something. It's usually something that involved pain or humiliation. "Nothing," Jake said. "We want nothing from you, except for you to be safe and free." Zara sat down heavily on a cargo crate. The weight of 3 years of slavery was catching up with her. Being free was more terrifying than being owned. At least as a slave, she knew what was expected of her. Freedom was unknown territory. "I have nowhere to go," she said quietly. "My world is conquered. My family is dead or enslaved. I have no money, no ship, no way to survive." Pete sat down on another crate across from her. His voice was gentle when he spoke. "You can stay with us if you want," he said. "Not as a slave or servant, as a crew member. We could use another pair of hands around here." "Pete's right," Lisa added. "Jake's always complaining that we need more help with the cargo handling." Jake shot his sister a look. He wasn't always complaining, but this wasn't the time to argue. "The choice is yours, Zara," Jake said. "We can drop you off at any human colony world. They have programs to help freed slaves start new lives. Or you can travel with us for a while until you decide what you want to do." Zara was quiet for a long time. She was using her newly freed telepathic abilities to sense the emotions of the 3 humans around her. What she found surprised her. Jake felt guilt and anger about what he had seen on Kepler Station, but also determination. He really did want to help her. Lisa felt protective concern, like an older sister worried about a younger sibling. Pete felt simple kindness and a desire to make her feel welcome. None of them felt the cruel. It's a pleasure that Zara had learned to associate with power over others. None of them saw her as property or as something to be used. "Why?" Zara asked. "Why did you free me? You don't know me. I'm not even human. Jake thought about the question. It wasn't easy to explain. My parents taught me that slavery is wrong, he said finally. They believed that all thinking beings have the right to be free. They died fighting for that belief. The hegemony enslaves entire worlds, Zara said. They have millions of slaves. You can't free them all. Maybe not, Jake admitted. But I could free you. Sometimes that's all you can do. Help one person at a time and hope it makes a difference. Zara felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. It was a small feeling. Barely there, but it was real. I would like to stay, she said quietly. For a while. Until I figure out what to do next. Lisa smiled. Good, you can take the spare cabin on deck too. Small, but it's private. A cabin? Zara asked. For me alone? Of course, Pete said. Everyone needs their own space. Zara had slept on floors and in cages for 3 years. The idea of having her own room seemed impossible. Jake stood up. Lisa showed Zara to her cabin. Pete, finish the supply loading. We leave in 2 hours. As they headed toward the stairs, Zara stopped and turned back to Jake. Thank you, she said. The words weren't enough, but they were all she had. You don't need to thank me, Jake replied. Everyone deserves to be free. 2 hours later, the Starfall lifted off from Kepler Station. Zara stood in the observation deck, watching the slave markets shrink away below them. For the first time in 3 years, she was leaving a place without chains around her neck. But freedom was strange and scary. She didn't know how to be free. She had almost forgotten who she was before slavery, as the ship jumped to hyperspace. Carrying her toward an uncertain future, Zara made herself a promise. She would learn to be free again. And maybe if she was lucky, she would find a way to help others like her. The 3 humans had given her something precious. Now she had 2. Figure out what to do with it. 3 months had passed since Jake freed Zara from Kepler Station. The Starfall continued its normal cargo runs, but something had changed aboard the ship. Zara was no longer the frightened, broken woman they had rescued. She was becoming herself. Again, her silver skin had gained a healthy glow. Her white hair, once dull and lifeless, now shone under the ship's lights. Most importantly, her black eyes held life again. She smiled sometimes, and even laughed at Pete's terrible jokes. Zara had proven to be a valuable crew member. She was quick to learn and worked hard without being asked. Her telepathic abilities made her useful in negotiations with other psychic species. She could sense when someone was lying or planning to cheat them. But Jake noticed that Zara grew. Quiet whenever they passed slave ships or visited stations where slavery was common. He could see the pain in her eyes when she spotted other Villani in chains. They were loading cargo on Frontier Station when everything changed. Zara was helping. Pete checked the manifest when she suddenly stopped working. Her eyes went wide and she grabbed Pete's arm. There are others here, she whispered. Others? Pete asked. Villani, my people. They're calling for help. Jake appeared from behind a stack of containers. What's wrong? Zara says. There are Villani here, Pete explained. Zara closed her eyes and concentrated. Her telepathic abilities were much stronger now that she had been free from the collar for months. 5 of them, she said. Maybe 6? They're scared? They're being kept in the lower levels of the station? Jake felt the familiar anger rising. In his chest, the same anger he had felt on Kepler Station. Are they slaves? He asked. Zara nodded. They're being transported to the Nexus system to be sold. Jake looked around the busy cargo bay. Other ships were loading and unloading their goods. Everyone was going about their normal business, while people were suffering just a few levels. Below them, can you contact them? Jake asked. I think so, Zara said. But it's dangerous. If their guards have psychic detectors, they might notice. Try it, Jake said. Zara sat down on a cargo crate and closed her eyes again. She reached out with her mind, searching for the telepathic signatures of her people. It took several minutes, but finally she made contact. The response was immediate and desperate. 6 Villani were being held in a cargo container in the station's lower bay. They were being transported by a hegemony merchant ship called the Profit Maker. The ship was scheduled to leave in 4 hours. Zara opened her eyes. Tears were running down her cheeks. "They're children," she said. "The oldest is maybe 16. They were taken from their families just last week." Jake felt sick. Bad enough that adults were enslaved, but children made it worse. "We have to help them," he said. Lisa appeared at the top of the cargo ramp. She had been in the station buying supplies and had overheard the conversation. "Jake, we can't just steal people from a hegemony ship," she said. "That would make us criminals." "We're already criminals," Jake replied. "The moment we freed Zara, we became criminals in hegemony." Space. Pete was checking his toolkit. "I might be able to disable their security systems," he said. "If Zara can tell us exactly where they're being held?" "This is insane," Lisa said, but Jake could see she was already thinking about how to make it work. His sister had never been able to ignore suffering either. They spent the next 2 hours planning. Zara used her telepathic abilities to map out the lower bay and identify the guards. Lisa plotted an escape route. The plan was simple, which Jake hoped meant it might actually work. Pete would cause a power failure in the upper levels, drawing security away from the cargo bays. Jake and Zara would sneak into the lower bay and free the children. Lisa would have the Starfall ready for immediate departure at 2200 station time. They put their plan into action. Pete's distraction worked perfectly. Half the station's lights went out, and emergency alarms started blaring. Security teams rushed toward the upper levels where the power grid was located. Jake and Zara made their way to the lower bay using maintenance tunnels. The area was darker and quieter than the upper levels. Most of the cargo containers were automated, so there weren't many people around. They found the Prophet Maker docked at Bay 7. It was an ugly ship with scarred hull plating and weapon ports. That had seen heavy use, the kind of ship owned by people who didn't care about laws or morals. Zara pointed to a large cargo container near the ship's loading ramp. "They're in there," she whispered. There were 2 guards, both hegemony soldiers, in battle armor. They looked bored and were talking about wanting to get off duty. Jake pulled out a small device Pete had given him. It was a sonic disruptor that would knock out the guards without killing them. Pete had insisted on that. They were rescuing people, not starting a war. The disruptor worked as advertised. Both guards collapsed unconscious. Jake dragged them behind some cargo containers while Zara ran to the container holding the Villani children. The lock was electronic, but Zara's telepathic abilities included some technopathic skills. She concentrated, and the lock clicked open. Inside the container, 6 young Villani were huddled together in the darkness. They were thin and scared, wearing the same kind of rags that Zara had worn. Metal collars around their necks suppressed. Their telepathic abilities, when they saw Zara, they tried to back away. To them, she might be another guard or slave handler. Zara spoke to them in the Villani language, her voice gentle and reassuring. She told them she had once been a slave too, but now she was free. She told them about Jake and the other humans who had rescued her. The children looked at Jake with a mixture of fear and hope. They had heard stories about humans, but had never seen one before. "We're going to get you out of here," Jake said. He didn't know if they understood Galactic Standard. But Zara translated for him. Removing 6 slave collars took longer than removing 1. Pete's tools worked, but each collar had to be disabled individually. Jake kept watching for more guards, while Zara helped the children. The youngest was a girl who looked no more than 12. When her collar came off, she immediately reached out with her mind to touch Zara's thoughts. The telepathic contact made them both cry. "Her name is Kira," Zara told Jake. "She says the guards told them they were going to be household servants for rich families, but she could sense their real thoughts. They were lying." Jake didn't want to think about what the children's real fate would have been. They made their way back through the maintenance tunnels, with the 6 young Villani following close behind. The children stayed quiet, trusting Zara to lead them too. Safety Lisa had the Starfall powered up and ready to go when they arrived. She took one look at the children and immediately started preparing the crew quarters to accommodate them. "Pete, get us out of here fast," Jake ordered as soon as everyone was aboard. The Starfall lifted off from Frontier Station just as the station's security forces realized what had happened. By the time they reached the docking bay, the human ship was already jumping to hyperspace. In the ship's common area, 6 Villani children sat close together, still afraid but beginning to hope. Zara sat with them, speaking in their own language and sharing her memories of freedom. "What do we do with them?" Lisa asked Jake quietly. "Same thing we did with Zara," Jake replied. "Give them a choice. We can take them to a human colony where they'll be safe, or they can stay with us until they decide what they want to do." Pete was monitoring the communication channels. "Boss, we might have a problem," he said. "Word is spreading about what we did. The hegemony is putting out bounties on us." Jake wasn't surprised. Freeing slaves was bad for business, and business was what the hegemony cared about most. "How much?" he asked. 50,000 credits for the ship and crew," Pete replied. "They want us alive for questioning." Zara looked up from where she was comforting the children. "There are others," she said. "I can feel them. They're Villani, other species. They're calling out for help." Jake looked around at his crew and their new passengers. They had started something. They couldn't stop. Word would spread through the telepathic networks that humans were freeing slaves. More calls for help would come. "Then we'd better get organized," Jake said. "If we're going to do this, we need to do it right." Over the next few days, as they traveled toward human space, they began planning something bigger than any of them. Had imagined they were going to build a network, an underground railroad that would help slaves escape to freedom. It was dangerous work that would make them enemies of the most powerful government in the galaxy. But as Jake watched Zara teaching the children how to be free, he knew they had no choice. Some things were worth fighting for. Freedom was one of them. 6 months had passed since the rescue at Frontier Station. The Starfall was no longer just a cargo ship. It had become the heart of a growing network of humans and freed slaves working together to fight the slave trade. Jake's crew had grown. The 6 Villani children had chosen to stay with them, and Zara had trained them in both combat and telepathic communication. 3 other ships had joined their cause: the merchant vessel Liberty Bell, the freight hauler New Dawn, and a small scout ship called the Freedom Runner. But their success had not gone unnoticed. Commander Vexthorn of the Hegemony Security Forces sat in his command chair aboard the warship Iron Fist, studying reports about the Slave Liberation Network. Thorn was a tall, thin alien with gray skin and cold yellow eyes. He had built his career on crushing rebellions and maintaining order in hegemony space. The humans were becoming a serious problem. In 6 months, they had freed over 200 slaves and cost the hegemony millions of credits and lost property. Worse, their actions were inspiring other species to resist. Slave uprisings were breaking out on 3 different worlds. Thorn had tried using conventional tactics. He had increased security at slave markets and put bounties on the human ships. But the rebels were too smart and too careful. They used telepathic communication networks that were impossible to intercept. They struck quickly and vanished before security forces could respond. It was time for a different approach. Aboard the Starfall, Jake was reviewing their latest mission reports when Zara suddenly grabbed his arm. Her black eyes were wide with fear. "Something's wrong," she said. "I'm sensing a distress call, but it feels strange." "Strange how?" Jake asked. Zara closed her eyes and concentrated. Her telepathic abilities had grown much stronger over the months, and she could now communicate across vast distances with other Villani. "It's from a group of Villani on a transport ship near the Sigma system," she said. "But the thoughts feel too organized, too clear. When people are truly in distress, their mental voices are chaotic and panicked. This feels planned." Lisa looked up from her navigation console. "You think it's a trap?" "Maybe," Zara said. "But what if it's real and we ignore it? What if people die because we were too careful?" It was the question that haunted all of them. How do you balance caution with the need to help people? Jake studied the star charts. The Sigma system was on the edge of hegemony space, near several human colonies. If it was a trap, they would have escape routes. If it was real, they couldn't abandon people who needed help. "We'll check it out," Jake decided, but we go in ready for trouble. 2 days later, the Starfall dropped out of hyperspace near the coordinates Zara had been given. They found a hegemony transport ship drifting apparently powerless in space. The ship's transponder identified it as the Cargo Master. Pete scanned. The ship with their sensors? I'm reading life signs, he said. Looks like about 20 beings in the cargo hold. But there's something weird about their engine signatures. Weird how? Jake asked. Their engines are running, but they're trying to look like they're not. Like they're pretending to be disabled. Jake felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Zara had been right. This was a trap. How many other ships are in the area? He asked Pete. Expanded the sensor range. His face went pale. 6 ships, boss. All hegemony military. They're hiding behind the moon, but I can detect their energy signatures. It's definitely a trap, Lisa said. We should get out of here now. But Zara was still concentrating on the telepathic signals from the transport ship. Wait, she said. There really are Volani on that ship. I can feel their fear. They're being used as bait, but they're real prisoners. Jake cursed. Thorn was clever. He had put real slaves on the ship to make the trap believable. If Jake tried to rescue them, he would be flying into an ambush. If he left, innocent people would suffer for his cowardice. Can you talk to them? Jake asked. Zara. I'm trying, she said, but there's interference. Something is blocking the telepathic signals. On the bridge of the Iron Fist, Commander Thorn watched his trap unfold. He had 20 real Volani slaves aboard the transport ship, all fitted, with special collars that allowed limited telepathic communication, just enough to lure the humans in. Sir, the human ship is maintaining position, his tactical officer reported. They suspect something. Thorn smiled coldly. Of course they do. They're not stupid. They won't be able to resist trying to save the slaves. Humans are predictable that way. Jake made his decision. We're going in, he said. But we do it smart. Lisa, plot a course that keeps us as far from the moon as possible. Pete, charge all weapons and prepare for immediate jump to hyperspace. Jake, this is suicide, Lisa protested. Maybe, Jake admitted, but we can't leave those people. If we start abandoning slaves because it's dangerous, we might as well quit now. The Starfall moved slowly toward the transport ship. Jake kept their weapons powered but not targeted. He didn't want to provoke an attack until he was ready. When they were still 1,000 kilometers away, Zara suddenly screamed and grabbed her head. It's a psychic amplifier, she gasped. They're using the Volani on the transport to boost a telepathic attack. Pain shot through Zara's mind as the amplified telepathic assault hit her. The hegemony had found a way to turn her own people's abilities against her. Lisa, evasive maneuvers, Jake shouted, but it was too late. The 6th hegemony. Ships emerged from behind the moon, their weapons charging. The Iron Fist led the attack, its massive guns targeting the Starfall's engines. Multiple ships incoming, Pete reported. We're outnumbered 6-1. Jake felt the ship shake as the first energy blasts hit their shields. Can you get us out of here? Working on it? Lisa replied, her hands flying over the navigation controls. But Thorn had planned well. The hegemony ships had positioned themselves to block all the normal hyperspace jump points. The Starfall was trapped. Surrender now, and your deaths will. Be quick. Thorn's voice came over the communication system. Continue to resist, and I will make you watch as I execute every slave you have freed. Jake looked around his bridge. Pete was working frantically to reroute power to their weapons. Lisa was trying to find an escape route. Zara was fighting through the psychic attack to stay conscious. The 6 Volani children they had rescued were in the crew quarters, probably terrified. Along with them were 12 other freed slaves who had chosen to stay with the ship rather than settle on human colonies. Jake thought about his parents. They had died fighting for what they believed in. Maybe it was time for him to do the same. Target their command ship, Jake ordered. Boss, our weapons can't penetrate their shields, Pete protested. I know, Jake said, but maybe we can buy enough time for the others to escape. Before he could give the order to fire, something unexpected happened. 3 more ships dropped out of hyperspace behind the hegemony fleet. Jake recognized them immediately, the Liberty Bell, the New Dawn, and the Freedom Runner, Captain Amy. Chen's voice came over the communication system. Sorry we're late to the party, Jake. We got Czar's distress call through the telepathic network. The 3 rescue ships opened fire on the hegemony fleet from behind. The surprise attack caught Thorne's ships off guard and disrupted their formation. "All ships concentrate fire on the transport vessel," Jake ordered. "We need to rescue those slaves." The battle was fierce but brief. The combined firepower of 4 human ships was enough to overwhelm the transport's defenses. Jake led a boarding party across to the cargo master while the other ships kept the hegemony fleet busy. They found the 20 Villani slaves chained in the cargo hold, just as Zara had sensed. But removing their special collars took precious time, and Jake could hear the battle raging outside. "Jake, we need to go now," Lisa's voice came through his communicator. "Thorne is bringing in reinforcements." Jake looked at the freed Villani. They were weak and frightened, but they were free. "Can you get them to the ships?" he asked the boarding party. "Already on it, boss," Pete replied. As they evacuated the transport ship, Jake felt a mixture of victory and fear. They had saved 20 more people, but Thorne now knew exactly how dangerous they were. The commander would not underestimate them again. The 4 human ships jumped to hyperspace just as hegemony reinforcements arrived. They had escaped the trap, but Jake knew their real troubles were just beginning. Thorne would be coming for them. With everything he had, the hunt was about to intensify, and Jake wasn't sure they were ready for what was coming next. The secret meeting took place on a small asteroid station in neutral space. Representatives from 12 different human ships had gathered to discuss the intelligence that Zara had uncovered through the telepathic network. Jake stood before the assembled captains, looking at faces he had come to know and trust over the past year. Captain Amy Chen of the Liberty Bell, Captain Ron Hayes of the New Dawn, Captain Kate Miller of the Freedom Runner, and 9 others who had joined their cause. "Nexus Prime," Jake said, pointing to the holographic display in the center of the room. 3 days from now, the largest slave auction in hegemony space will take place there. Over 500 beings will be sold, including 300 Villani. The room was quiet. Everyone understood what those numbers meant. People would disappear into slavery unless something was done. "It's a fortress," Captain Hayes said, studying the display. "Orbital defenses, a full military garrison, and Commander Thorne's entire fleet will be there providing security." "It's suicide," Captain Miller added. "We're talking about attacking the most heavily defended location in hegemony space." Zara stepped forward. Her silver skin seemed to glow in the dim light of the meeting room. Over the past year, she had become more than just a freed slave. She was now the coordinator of the telepathic network that connected liberated beings across the galaxy. "My people have been sending me messages," she said. "The 300 Villani being held on Nexus Prime include children as young as 8 years old. Some are pregnant mothers who will give birth in slavery. Others are elders who remember our world before the hegemony conquered it." She paused, her black eyes meeting each captain's gaze. "They know we're coming. They're ready to fight for their freedom, but they need us to give them the chance." Jake looked around the room. He could see the fear in some faces, the determination. In others, these were good people who had risked everything to fight slavery. But what he was asking them to do went beyond anything they had attempted before. "I won't order anyone to come with us," Jake said. "This is voluntary. Anyone who wants to leave can do so with no judgment." None of the captains moved. They had all seen too much suffering to walk away now. Captain Chen stood up. "What's the plan?" Jake activated a detailed schematic of Nexus Prime. "The auction takes place in the main market complex. That's where most of the slaves will be held. Zara's network has identified the guard rotations and security protocols. The orbital defenses are the real problem," Pete added from where he sat near the back of the room. "Nexus Prime has enough firepower to destroy our entire fleet." "Where the diversion comes in," Jake said, "half our ships will attack the military installations on the far side of the planet. That should draw most of the defense fleet away from the market complex. And the other half?" Captain Hayes asked. "Goes in fast and hard to rescue the slaves." Jake replied. "We'll have maybe 30 minutes before Thorne realizes what's happening and sends his ships back." Captain Miller shook her head. 30 minutes to evacuate 500 people? That's impossible." Zara spoke again, "Not if they're ready to help themselves." I've been in contact with some of the slaves through the telepathic network. They're organized and prepared. They know which ships to board and where to go. What about extraction? Captain Chen asked. Even if we get the slaves out, Thorn will chase us across the galaxy. Jake had been thinking about that problem for weeks. We split up, he said. Each ship takes a different route to human space. Some of us might not make it, but most of the freed slaves will reach safety. The room fell silent again. Everyone understood that Jake was asking them to risk their lives and their ships for people they had never met, Captain. Hayes was the first to speak. I'm in. Me too, Captain Chen said. One by one, all 12 captains voiced their agreement. They were going to attempt the largest slave liberation in galactic history. 2 days later, the combined fleet of 13 human ships approached. Nexus Prime. The planet was a brown and gray world covered with industrial complexes and military bases. Orbital defense platforms ringed the planet like deadly satellites. Jake stood on the bridge of the Starfall, watching the planet grow larger on the view screen. Beside him, Zara was in telepathic contact with the slaves in the market complex. Below, they're ready, she reported. The moment we attack, they'll begin their escape. Lisa, take us in, Jake ordered. The battle began when Captain Hayes and 6 other ships attacked the military installations on the far side of Nexus Prime. Explosions lit up space as the diversionary force engaged the orbital defenses. Commander Thorn, aboard the Iron Fist in orbit around the planet, immediately ordered his fleet to respond to the attack. Just as Jake had hoped, most of the hegemony ships moved away from the market complex to engage the human attackers. Now, Jake shouted. The Starfall and 5 other ships dove toward the planet's surface, heading for the slave markets. Anti-aircraft. Fire lit up the sky around them, but they were moving too fast to be easily targeted. Jake's boarding party hit the market complex like a lightning strike. They had trained for this moment for months, and everyone knew their job. Pete led a team to disable the security systems while Jake and Zara headed for the slave-holding areas. What they found was chaos. The slaves had indeed organized themselves. Freed by sympathizers among the market staff, hundreds of beings were already moving toward the landing areas where the human ships waited, but not everything was going according to plan, Jake, Zara called out. There are more guards than we expected. Gemini soldiers were pouring into the market complex from hidden barracks. Someone had betrayed them, and Thorn had been ready for the attack. All teams, accelerate the evacuation. Jake ordered into his communicator. The battle in the market complex was fierce. Jake's people were outnumbered, but they were fighting for something they believed in. The freed slaves fought alongside them, using whatever weapons they could find. Zara was everywhere at once, using her telepathic abilities to coordinate the evacuation and rally the frightened slaves. Her silver skin was streaked with dirt and blood, but her eyes burned with determination. Transport 1 is loaded, came a voice over the communicator. Transport 2, departing now. One by one, the human ships lifted off from Nexus Prime, carrying their precious cargo of freed slaves. But the evacuation was taking longer than planned. Jake, we've got problems. Lisa's voice crackled through the communicator. Thorn figured out our diversion. He's bringing his fleet back. Jake looked around the market complex. There were still over 100 slaves who hadn't made it to the ships yet. How long do we have? He asked. Maybe 10 minutes before the first? Hegemony ships arrive, Lisa replied. It wasn't enough time. Some of the slaves would be left behind. That's when Zara made a decision that would be remembered for generations. I'm staying, she told Jake. What? No, absolutely not. Someone needs to coordinate the final evacuation, Zara said. My telepathic abilities are the only way to get everyone out safely. Then I'm staying too, Jake said. Zara smiled. It was the first time Jake had seen her truly happy since the day he freed her. No, she said. You need to live to continue the fight. But first, help me do something. Zara walked to the center of the market complex and activated an old communication system. Her voice echoed across Nexus Prime and was broadcast to every ship in the system. My name is Zara, she said. I was a slave for 3 years. I was beaten, starved, and treated like an animal. I thought I would die in chains. Jake watched as hegemony soldiers stopped shooting to listen to her words. But then I met humans who showed me that some people believe all thinking beings deserve to be free. They risked their lives to save mine, and now I fight alongside them. On ships throughout the system, both human and hegemony crews were listening to her broadcast. Today, we have freed 500 people. But there are millions more in chains across the galaxy. The fight is not over. It will never be over as long as one thinking being is owned by another. The last transport ship lifted off from Nexus. Prime as Zara finished her speech. Jake grabbed her hand, and they ran toward the Starfall, which was the only ship still on the ground. To anyone listening, Zara continued as they ran, remember this day. Remember that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they choose to fight for what is right. They made it aboard the Starfall, just as Thorn's ships appeared in the sky above them. The cargo ship lifted off under heavy fire, its shields sparking from multiple hits. But they had done it. 500 beings who had woken up as slaves that morning were now free, as the human fleet scattered toward different hyperspace jump points. Jake stood with Zara on the observation deck of the Starfall. Behind them, former slaves from a dozen different species were beginning new lives. Do you think it will make a difference? Zara asked. Jake thought about her question. The hegemony was still powerful. Slavery still existed on hundreds of worlds. But something had changed. Word of the liberation would spread. Other species would hear about humans who fought for freedom. Yes, Jake said. I think it will make all the difference. 3 months later, reports reached them that slave uprisings had broken out on 17 different worlds. The Villani homeworld had declared its independence from the hegemony.